The Chicago Bears find themselves in a bit of a conundrum with Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty. Either he's a generational can't-miss running back prospect, and that means he's going to be gone well before the Bears pick at 10, or he's not a generational can't-miss running back prospect, so then is he even worth taking at 10?
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. On the show today, I want to look at the prospect, well, pun intended, of drafting Ashton Jeanty, both what he is as an NFL draft prospect and also what that would look like for the Chicago Bears. Is it worth it to the Chicago Bears? Is that what the best decision for the Chicago Bears would be with that 10th overall pick? Will they have the opportunity to draft Ashton Jeanty with that 10th overall pick? Because I think Ryan Poles has put the Bears in a good position where almost anything is on the table for that 10th pick. They don't have to go in any specific direction, and they can sit there and take the player they think is best on the draft board. But is that going to be a running back in that spot? That's where the real debate starts. So I want to look at how the Bears are set up for that 10th pick, where the value is for running back in this draft, and how Ashton Jeanty stacks up with other running backs and other options for the Chicago Bears in the first round. I think it's important to establish on the front end, though, that I do believe the Bears are in a position here where they could add a running back with that first round pick. I think there's almost any position, with a couple of obvious exceptions, that you could justify using a first round pick on. Like, of course, the Bears are not going to draft a quarterback with their first round pick. That's one of those positions where even if, like, say, Shedeur Sanders or whatever is still on the board at 10, like, he might be quote unquote best player available, but obviously, it feels stupid even saying it out loud, the Bears are not going to draft a QB with the 10th overall pick. Obviously, they're not going to draft a fullback or a kicker or a punter or a long snapper with the 10th overall pick. Beyond that, well, I think some positions are better uses of the pick than others. I think just about every other position on the roster is on the table because of how much you've set this team up with filling needs in free agency, right? For so long, all we've really focused on throughout the offseason was offensive line and defensive line. Those were the two biggest holes, and you thought, whether it's Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks or maybe Armand Membo, if he makes it there, like there could be an offensive lineman the Bears like with the 10th overall pick, could be a defensive lineman like James Pierce or Shamar Stewart or Mike Green, Michael Williams from Georgia. Like those have been the most common mock draft picks for the Bears, in part because those have been the biggest needs left on the roster. And then also those are good players at positions of need. And so if you have someone who's basically a best player available, but then also fills a position of need, that's the sweet spot for who you want to take in the NFL draft. But now that the Bears have addressed the offensive line with, Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney and Drew Dahlman, they still need depth on the offensive line and still need to draft an offensive lineman, but it doesn't have to be a starter with the 10th overall pick necessarily. And they address the defensive line with Dio Odengbo and Grady Jarrett in free agency. Like, yes, they still need another pass rusher and more depth on the defensive line, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the 10th overall pick, your first round pick. The Bears have 4 picks in the top 75 and 6 or 7 picks in the draft overall. Like, they've got room to add at those positions, and you're not feeling hamstrung to say, hey, I have to get a lineman in the first round. And I think when you start to expand it beyond that, it's like, okay, if I don't have to take a lineman, is there any position like that you wouldn't take there? And I think the hardest arguments are probably linebacker and safety, but I wouldn't even necessarily rule those out either. Like as we think about, yes, wide receiver might be in this conversation. Why not take another wide receiver? You've got DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. Can you have too many good wide receivers? If that's the best player available on your board, you still got time to address needs. Like if there's truly a great wide receiver there, I don't think you could say 100% no, don't do it. It's a luxury and it's extra, but it's on board. Like same thing with running back. Like yes, if there's a running back, if Ashton Jeanty is a guy you think you cannot miss on and he is the best player on the board, like that's not out of the question. It's not like, oh, why are you taking a running back or that wide receiver when you've got this big need that you need to pick with the draft, like or with your draft picks. It's like same thing if it's still an offensive lineman. I think a tight end can be in the conversation. You need a number 2 who can play a lot with Cole Kmet. Running back, offensive line, wide receiver, tight end, like pretty much everything but QB and fullback on offense, and then defense. If it's a defensive end, there's room for an edge rusher there. If it's a defensive tackle, there's room for more defensive tackles in here. If it's a cornerback, CB, I think that's a player who could come in and start opposite Jalen Johnson. Like with where the question marks are around Tyreek Stevenson, you still believe in Tyreek Stevenson. You still hope he can continue to get better and that he may be a better scheme fit for Dennis Allen than what he was with Matt Eberflus. So like no one's giving up on Tyreek Stevenson. But if you're sitting at 10 and a corner is just clearly the best player and there aren't really any other guys that feel nearly as good, like I don't think that's totally out of the question. It's not ideal perhaps, but it's not out of the question. Safety and linebacker become a little bit tougher because, okay, if you draft a safety in the first round, is he going to sit all of his rookie season or you're just waiting for Jaquan Brisker to get hurt? Like, I don't know if that's the best use of a first round pick, but could you find ways to get him on the field as can you rotate in at linebacker sometimes in a nickel package in passing situations or play him in the slot sometimes? Like, is there a way? Maybe. And same thing with a linebacker, right? With TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds, like that if you drafted a linebacker in the first round, he could play in the Jack Sanborn starting role, but Sanborn played like 20% of the snaps last season, mostly a special teams player. Like it's hard to find playing time for a linebacker here. So it doesn't feel like a safety or a linebacker would necessarily be the best use of a top 10 pick on this team. And yet you're not just drafting this player for 1 year. You're drafting them for at least the next 5 years of their rookie contract, and then ideally another 3 to 5 years on a second contract, and even more ideally another 3 to 5 years on a third contract, right? Like ideally, this is a 15-year player for your franchise if you really hit a home run in this draft pick. So just because you might not need something this year doesn't mean that player can't still be a good pick. If they're the best player available and you're convinced this is going to be a great player, if that's a safety, they're going to be a starter next year. If it's a linebacker, there's going to be a starting spot for them next year. Like there's going to be a need for a player at any position eventually, besides quarterback, really, in theory. So it's hard to rule just about anything out, including running back, with somebody like Ashton Jeanty. But I also think positional value starts to play a role here, where it's like, okay, yes, if it's the best player available, get the best player. But if you could get another really good player at that same position later in the draft, do you need to take one in the first round if you can get a pretty good player in the second round? Like if the drop-off's not that big between the players in the first round and the players in the second and third round, maybe you'd be better off taking a player at a position where the drop-off is greater or where the value is greater. It's harder to find really good players on the offensive or defensive line than it is to find running backs. So we'll take a look at like how other teams have acquired their running backs and where running backs have been drafted, where the best running backs have been drafted and how first-round running backs have done to kind of get a sense of like, is this worth it for the Chicago Bears to potentially take someone like Ashton Jeanty next on Locked On Bears? This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. And with Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, all experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with that top freelance talent across multiple industries. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Posting a job is free and easy, and within a day, multiple qualified candidates are available to choose from. And it's a way to scale your business more efficiently with a more affordable freelance work that's still top tier. So visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Locked On Bears is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out and shopping online and entertainment, it's easy to lose track sometimes, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. Monarch Money is your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. It's not just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, your investments and spending all in one place, so you can stop just managing your money and start actually building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you got your bank account here, your credit card there, your retirement account here, your other investments here. You can check all of your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals all in the same place. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first 12 months. So the Bears are in a position where, in theory, they could take just about anything with that first round pick. Running back included, tight end included. We'll have to have that conversation in a little while about the Penn State tight end that is polarizing, I think, for Chicago Bears fans. I think there's much more of a universal support for picking Ashton Jeanty, but I've generally been someone who walks the line of, yes, running backs have value and it's worth upgrading if you can. I'm not always fully convinced that using a top 10 pick specifically is the best use of that pick on a running back. That two things. One, you can find, and every year there are great running backs outside of the first round. You do not always find the best running back in a draft class in the first round. And every year there are running backs in the second, third, fourth, fifth, and even sixth rounds that end up being 1,000-yard rushers and even better than a lot of the running backs taken earlier in the draft. It's more so than a lot of other positions. The hits are spread out quite a bit more. And alongside that, there are plenty of examples of first-round running backs that were supposed to be the next great thing, that were well worth a top 10 pick at the time, that didn't end up panning out. There is no true such thing as a can't-miss running back prospect. As great as Ashton Jeanty is, and as all of the measurables and all of the production stats, the missed tackles forced, the yards after contact, every stat tells you Ashton Jeanty is great. But that doesn't always guarantee that this pick is going to work and that he's going to be, the next Saquon Barkley game-changing NFL running back. There are factors that are beyond anyone's control that no one can predict. It's likely he's going to be a very good player, certainly maybe more likely than a lot of other top prospects in this draft, but there's no sure thing. There is no such thing as a sure thing in the NFL draft, even with Ashton Jeanty, especially when I feel like you can look around and say, when there's really good running backs also that are going to go in the second, third, fourth round that maybe they're not going to be as great as Ashton Jeanty, but really darn good and certainly good enough for what the Chicago Bears might need at running back. We talked yesterday about how much the Bears do or don't need at running back with DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson. So we're not going to rehash that whole thing here, but you can go back and take a listen to where I think DeAndre Swift is getting a little bit underrated all of a sudden. Like the criticism has gotten a little bit too high. I still don't think he's that great, but people are acting like he's terrible. And I think the truth is kind of somewhere in the middle there. And I look around the rest of the NFL and I look at all of the different teams that have very good running backs that were not drafted in the first round. I think about all the teams in the playoffs this past season and what running backs they had. And it's not as though they're all first round picks. Of course, the Lions have Jahmyr Gibbs as a first round pick. The Eagles have Saquon Barkley as a first round pick. But I think that's it in the NFC. And I look around the AFC and I'm not sure. Najee Harris with the Steelers, I think, is the only first round pick among running backs on playoff teams this past season. It's not as though the first round is the only place to get a running back who's going to be successful for your franchise. If you look at all of the different running backs that hit 1,000 yards this past season and how many of them were not first round picks, we forget, like Derrick Henry was not a first round pick. He was drafted 45th overall by the Tennessee Titans in the second round. Jonathan Taylor, one of the NFL's leading rushers, second round pick. And then you go guys like Kyron Williams from the Rams, 1,000-yard rusher in the fifth round. Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers, 1,000-yard rusher from the fourth round. Aaron Jones, who was great for the Packers and is now still playing very well for the Minnesota Vikings, fifth round pick, 182nd overall in that draft. As a rookie, Bucky Irving, drafted by the Buccaneers this past season, 1,000-yard rusher, rookie 4th-round pick. James Conner of the Cardinals, 3rd-round pick. Tony Pollard, originally of the Cowboys, now with Tennessee Titans, is a 4th-round pick. And the Cowboys found an undrafted free agent in Rico Dowdle, who was able to rush for 1,000 yards. Now, yes, there's more to being a great running back than rushing for 1,000 yards, and yet still, that was just 9. There were I think there were a couple others I couldn't fit all in one list, in one graphic for the video here, of like 1,000-yard rushers from this past season that were not first-round picks. Like, of course, you've got your Saquon Barkleys and your, I'm trying to think, there's a couple others. Obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs. Let me pull up the rushing list real quick as I'm talking here. Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Jacobs, I think, was a first-round pick for the Raiders, who's now with the Green Bay Packers. Like, yes, there are first-round picks that became 1,000-yard rushers. And sure, of course, like the hit rate for first-round picks is always going to be higher than the hit rate for second-round picks, for fifth-round picks, for fourth-round picks. Yes, for every Bucky Irving, Tony Pollard, and Chuba Hubbard, there's the equally a number of, Roschon Johnsons and other running backs that haven't been nearly as successful in that area. But it's not as though the first round for running backs is some guarantee either. Like, you look at the last 8 or 10 first-round running backs in the NFL. The most recent one was Bijan Robinson, and then Jahmyr Gibbs. I think those were the same draft class. Robinson's obviously been great for the Falcons. Gibbs has been great for the Lions. Like, of course, those have been successful first-round running back picks. You got Najee Harris for the Steelers, who's been pretty good. Maybe there's been some Steelers fans have had mixed feelings about him, but he's been a 1,000-yard rusher every year. Like, he's been fine. But then you have, Travis Etienne. It's a first-round pick who obviously really flamed out pretty badly here. Clyde Edwards-Helaire of the Kansas City Chiefs, 32nd pick, so barely a first-round pick, but nonetheless, not a good pick for them. You got Rashad Penny of the Seattle Seahawks, Sony Michel of the New England Patriots, first-round picks at running back that did not work well. So yes, you've got your Gibbs and your Robinson and your Barkley and your Josh Jacobs, but then you also have your Trent Richardson, number 3 overall pick, I think, top 5 pick. Out of Alabama, everyone thought Trent Richardson was going to be great. This was going to be the next great running back, and completely flames out. Or Leonard Fournette from LSU goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars in the top 10, and it's like, man, this was a special running back who's going to be great in the NFL, and it just doesn't always work out. There are certainly big hits. There are certainly big misses, and that's what gives me pause about using the Chicago Bears 10th overall pick at the running back position, when there's no guarantee that Ashton Jeanty, or if somebody like Omarion Hampton comes into this conversation as well, there's, as much as I think Jeanty is a great running back prospect, and we'll talk about him compared to the other running backs in a second here, as much as I do think Jeanty is as strong of a running back prospect as we've seen in a while, there's no guarantee there. And so do I want to swing at a spot in running back when I think I can find other running backs later in the draft that can be maybe not 2,000-yard rushers like Barkley, but 1,000-yard rushers like Kyren Williams and Chuba Hubbard and Aaron Jones and James Conner and Tony Pollard, right? I can find those kind of running backs in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round, or maybe at the Bears' 2nd-round picks, right? I don't have to use a first-round pick to find this caliber of running back. But if I want to find a 10-sack edge rusher or a blue chip offensive lineman, that is harder to find in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round than it is in the 1st round. Those more premium positions tend to require earlier investments to get high quality players, whereas positions like running back and safety and tight end and linebacker, you can find those players that turn out to be great players later in the draft at a higher rate than other positions later in the draft. And that's what makes, just from a pure positional value standpoint, it harder to do that investment at running back. Now, perhaps Ashton Jeanty can be such a special running back prospect and so rare that he makes it worth taking with the 10th overall pick. But if Ashton Jeanty is that great, he's not going to be there for the Bears with the 10th overall pick. So we'll kind of look at where he fits in the running back draft class discussion and what that means for the Bears picking in the 1st round next on Locked On Bears.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Ashton Jeanty is certainly, to me, the head and shoulders top running back prospect in this draft. There's been some discussion about, okay, maybe Omarion Hampton from North Carolina is in that conversation. I think I've seen some people say they have Hampton ahead of Ashton Jeanty. It's not as though this is unanimous, universal, everyone agrees necessarily, but I think it's a pretty strong majority of Ashton Jeanty. And I think a lot of the numbers and metrics back that up. Jeanty hasn't run at his pro day yet. He didn't run at the combine. His pro day, I believe, is next Wednesday, the 26th. So we might get a 40-yard dash number and some other measurables in that regard. But I'm talking like what he did as far as on the field production in college. It is special and head and shoulders above the rest of this draft class. There's a bunch of great charts have gone out about this on social media, and I realize like charts are not great to explain on a podcast, and also like visually they can be hard to digest on a small screen if you watch the Locked On Bears YouTube channel. But if I can walk you through this briefly, you can even just visualize it if if it's hard to see or if you're just listening along in the audio. Where picture a chart with an X and a Y axis, right? And the vertical axis is how much yards after contact you create. One measurement is how many yards, if once there's contact, like how many yards do you get after that is a way of sort of separating what he does versus what the offensive line does. Because once you've made contact with a defender, it's just on you to gain additional yards after that contact. And then the x-axis going horizontal is how often you force a missed tackle as a runner, where again, sort of individual running back ability. They're not about the offensive line, not about the blocking, but just your ability to make someone miss. And when they chart every running back in this draft, or all the top running backs in this draft, on that chart with vertical axis being yards after contact and horizontal axis being missed tackles forced, Ashton Jeanty is way up, higher than every other prospect in both of those stat categories. Like in the visualization, it's in the top right of the chart. Like he is, there isn't another running back prospect anywhere near him in either of those stats. He is far and away the highest yards after contact per carry of any running back in this draft class, and far and away the highest rate of missed tackles forced of any running back in this draft class. If you want to think about it numerically, Jeanty, his yards after contact per carry was 5.25, and the next closest was Omarion Hampton the next closest was Damian Martinez of Miami, I believe. But nonetheless, he's like a full half a yard after contact. Like the next closest is 4.5. So you go from 5.25 to 4.5, and like everyone else is in the mid to low fours. He's in the low fives in terms of how many yards after contact he's averaging per carry. Same things in terms of missed tackles forced. He's forcing a missed tackle on 40% of his runs. The next closest was Cam Skedebo at Arizona State at 35%. Like everyone else is in the 20s and a little bit of low 30s, like upper 20s, low 30s. He's at 40. Like very clearly, Ashton Jeanty is way higher than everyone else in both these categories. He's clearly the best running back in this draft class. There's a bunch of other very good running backs that are all clustered together after him. You've got Omarion Hampton is right there next to Travion Henderson of Ohio State, Bashal Tutin from Virginia Tech, Cam Skedebo from Arizona State. A lot of these guys end up, the production stats end up coming out similarly as like, okay, there's Ashton Jeanty up here, and then there's 6 or 8 or 9 other really good running backs that look less good by comparison to Jeanty, because Jeanty's just in this otherworldly column of how productive he was on those runs. That's what makes him such an intriguing option for the Chicago Bears at 10. But I can't help but look at that and say, okay, if this guy is clearly this head and shoulders way better than everybody else running back, those players don't make it all the way down to the 10th overall pick. When you think about where some of these other first-round running backs have been drafted in recent seasons, right? We can even go all the way back to, Trent Richardson. This was in this category of running back, even though it didn't work out, 3rd overall pick. You've got Ezekiel Elliott, this kind of special running back, 4th overall pick. Leonard Fournette, 4th overall pick. Christian McCaffrey makes it down to 8. That's probably as close as you're going to get. But Barkley goes number 2 overall in his draft. And I think there's one more I'm forgetting here. Bijan Robinson, a couple years ago from Texas, right? Clearly the top running back, someone we talked about for the Bears as, could he make it to the Bears? Would that be someone the Bears might draft? We had the same kind of conversation. Goes 8th overall. Like these players don't make it to where the Bears are at 10 if they're truly this great. And so I come back to the sort of the catch-22 I started this with, which is like, if he's truly this great, the Bears won't even have a chance to decide on him. But if he makes it all the way to 10, is that not a sign that, hey, wait a minute, like either like all 9 of these teams got it wrong and don't think he's great, and we are the ones who think he's great, or maybe all these other 9 teams have the right idea here, and maybe that means it's not worth it to us just yet. Like that to me is what becomes tricky here, especially because you look at a couple of teams picking before the Bears where the Raiders would obviously make a lot of sense as a team that could take Ashton Jeanty, very early in this draft class. I think the Patriots might be a little bit too early for Jeanty only because somebody like Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter might be there. But if the quarterbacks fall, like say only one quarterback goes in the top 3, so then the top 3 picks in some order are Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, like Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, and Travis Hunter. Those will be the top 3 there then. Like, could the Patriots decide Jeanty versus Mason Graham versus, Will Campbell in there? Like, I think that's really within the possibility there, right? And then you work way down, like the Saints have a need at running back there. And certainly I think some of these other teams can be in that conversation for teams that need a running back. And if you're a team that could use a running back and you really think this is a can't miss special running back, they're going to take him. And it feels to me like the most likely outcome here is that Jeanty is gone before the Bears pick at 10. And then I think the second most likely outcome is that he's there at 10, but not worth the 10th overall pick. Like, that's the thing. He either has to be so great that the Bears can't take him, or not good enough for the Bears to take him. Because if he's good enough that the Bears should take him at 10, then he's good enough that the Saints should take him at 9, and that the Raiders should take him at 6. Like, especially in this draft class, where the super top players, right? The quarterbacks are kind of separate. The non-quarterback category, you got Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, and then it's like a conversation between Jeanty, the offensive lineman, and maybe the wide receiver, Tet McMillan. Like, but you got 3 players that I think would be clearly perhaps more well drafted, higher than Jeanty, right? Graham, Abdul Carter, and Travis Hunter. From there, if Jeanty is the great running back, he's right in that conversation for the next non-quarterback off the board. So you would have to have 9 teams take players other than Ashton Jeanty, while him being maybe one of the 5 best prospects in this draft class. If he's truly one of the 5 best prospects in this draft class, he will not survive 9 picks. The NFL, they're supposed to be too smart to let that happen. If he slips to 10, then maybe he doesn't deserve to be a top 10 pick, right? That's where it's you're sort of caught in this tricky spot with Ashton Jeanty. Ultimately, if I have to put a real stake on this, if the Bears draft Jeanty at 10, I'm not going to be mad. I'm not going to say, what a bad pick. Boo, Ryan Poles, fire this guy. He sucks. No, I will understand it, and we'll, hopefully see Ashton Jeanty be successful, and I can be excited about what he would be in the Bears backfield. I don't believe it's going to be the best use of their 10th overall pick, but I don't think it's the worst pick in the world. That's kind of where I land on it. Sure, I can be happy with Ashton Jeanty. It'll depend on what they do with the rest of the draft class, but yes, he's obviously an exciting running back that I could be excited about with the Chicago Bears. Just not my first choice, and just not what I think is the best choice for where Chicago is right now. But we'll have plenty of time to go through what the other Bears choices might be with that 10th overall pick in the coming month here before the NFL draft, right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen, you can get more draft talk and more Jeanty talk over on the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast with Damon Parson and Keith Sanchez. They got the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every single day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Coming back on Monday, make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.